Picture this. It is 11:47 at night. The fluorescent lights of KM Legal Partners are still blazing on the 14th floor of a glass tower in the heart of Seoul's Gangnam district. Outside, the Han River shimmers beneath a crescent moon. Inside, 6 of South Korea's most expensive attorneys are sweating through their shirts. And not because the air conditioning is broken. The Daeyoung Corporation trial resumes in 9 hours. And they are losing. Not just losing. They are about to hand their biggest corporate client a $200 million defeat that will follow KM Legal's reputation like a bad smell for the next decade. Lead partner Choi Byung-hyun has reviewed the contract dispute evidence 17 times. Senior associate Park Ji-soo has compiled a 40-page brief that, by all accounts, is technically beautiful and functionally useless. Everyone is exhausted. Everyone is frustrated. And everyone without exception has walked past the small glass-walled office at the end of the hallway without once looking inside. Because inside that office sits Amara Adeyemi. And Amara Adeyemi has just found something. She almost missed it herself. She'd been brought on as a junior associate 3 months ago, hired quietly by HR while the senior partners were traveling, which meant she'd spent her first 12 weeks being handed the documents nobody else wanted to touch. The filing, the footnotes, the secondary exhibits no one believed would matter. Which is precisely why she was the only one who had actually read Exhibit 23C. It was a supplementary logistics report. 42 pages of dry cargo movement data from 2019. The kind of document that makes your eyes cross after page 3. But on page 31, buried beneath a table of shipping container codes, Amara had spotted something that made her sit up so fast she knocked her cup of barley tea across her desk. A clause. One single clause in the original supply agreement, referenced in a footnote on page 31 of a document that everyone assumed was irrelevant. A dormant arbitration mechanism that Daeyoung's opposing counsel had never triggered, because according to this footnote, triggering it would have required a specific regulatory filing in 2020 that the opposing party had failed to complete. They hadn't just failed to strengthen their case. They had procedurally forfeited their right to the primary damages claim entirely. Daeyoung wasn't just defensible. Daeyoung could win. Amara read the clause 4 times. Then she pulled 3 secondary statutes to confirm the procedural requirement. Then she wrote up a 2-page memo, straightened the emerald green scarf she'd wrapped elegantly around her head that evening, picked up the memo and walked down the hallway. She knocked on the conference room door. Choi Byung-hyun looked up with the expression of a man who did not have time for whatever this was. "I found something," Amara said simply. By midnight the room had gone very quiet. By 12:30, Park Ji-soo had confirmed the statutory reference. By 1 a.m. the entire litigation strategy had been rebuilt around a single footnote in a document no one else had bothered to finish reading. At 1:15 the door to the conference room opened and Kang Min-jae walked in. He was the kind of man whose presence rearranged a room without announcing itself. Tall, composed, dressed in a dark charcoal suit despite the hour, the founder and managing partner of KM Legal Partners had been summoned from what Amara could only assume was a very comfortable evening, and yet he looked completely unbothered by it. He scanned the room, took the memo from Byung-hyun's outstretched hand and read it in silence. When he looked up he asked one question. "Who found this?" Byung-hyun hesitated for exactly 2 seconds too long. From the doorway Amara cleared her throat. "I did." Min-jae turned. He looked at her the way you look at someone you are genuinely seeing for the first time, not because they are new, but because you suddenly understand you should have been paying attention all along. "Your name," he said. "Amara Adeyemi. Junior associate. 3rd floor, end of the hallway, the office next to the printer that always jams." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The beginning of one. "Good work, Adeyemi." He turned back to the table and began issuing instructions, and Amara returned to her office, and that, she told herself firmly, was absolutely that. The next morning, KM Legal walked into court and dismantled the opposing counsel's entire case with one procedural argument. The judge's expression alone was worth the price of admission. By 3 p.m., Daeyoung Corporation was shaking Min-jae's hand in the lobby while flashbulbs went off. By 4 p.m., the firm's internal group chat had approximately 140 messages, most of which were variations of "we won," and several of which were less printable. And by 4:30, Amara Adeyemi was sitting at her desk eating rice crackers and trying to finish a filing when the knock came. Min-jae stood in her doorway. No entourage. No PA. "I'd like to formally recognize your contribution," he said. "We'll be adding a bonus to your next pay cycle." Amara looked at him. "Thank you. You've been here 3 months," he said. "Why haven't I seen any of your work before this?" He put down the rice cracker. "Probably because it's been going through 3 other people before it reaches anyone who matters." He studied her for a moment. "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation," she said pleasantly. "I don't complain. I solve problems. It's much more efficient." He tilted his head slightly. "Is that so? You can verify that with last night's outcome." And there it was. Not a smile but a full one this time, quick and genuine, and Amara made a mental note to be irritated by how good-looking he was and move on with her life. Because she had met men like Kang Min-jae before. Men who ran things. Men who could look at you like you were interesting right up until the moment someone more convenient walked in. She did not need his approval. She had never needed anyone's approval. She had built her entire career on that principle, and she was not about to let one well-timed smile undermine it. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe to Seoul Link Stories by Timmy for more unforgettable Afro-Korean love stories. And before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far our stories travel around the world. In the weeks that followed, Min-jae began pulling Amara into higher-level case preparation. Not with fanfare. Quietly, methodically, the way a man of his discipline did everything. A brief forwarded with a note. "Your analysis would be useful here." A meeting invitation with no explanation required. Amara attended every meeting with her notepad, her arguments fully formed, and her opinions completely unfiltered. Which was, it turned out, something of a problem. "With respect," she said during a strategy session in week 5. "That approach will work until opposing counsel calls Park Chul-min as a character witness, at which point the entire framing collapses. We should establish the commercial context first." Byung-hyun stared at her with the expression of a man who was 62 years old and had not been corrected in a meeting since approximately 2009. Min-jae at the head of the table said nothing. He wrote something on his notepad. After the meeting, Park Jisoo caught up with Amara in the hallway. "You know," Jisoo said, voice light and careful in the way that meant it wasn't actually light or careful, "you might want to be more measured in how you share your opinions." "I'll keep that in mind," Amara said. "Some people find it a lot." "Some people," Amara said warmly, "find competence uncomfortable. That's their work to do, not mine." Jisoo blinked. Amara walked away. The teasing started quietly the way all small cruelties do. A comment here about the scarf she wore on Tuesdays. A smirk exchanged between 2 paralegals when she walked into the break room. Someone had taped a wig catalog page to the staff bulletin board. No name, no explanation. And by the time Amara arrived that morning, half the junior staff had already seen it. She took it down herself. Folded it once. Put it in the recycling bin. Nobody said anything. She went to her office, sat down, and spent exactly 4 minutes feeling the particular ache that comes not from cruelty itself but from the exhausting predictability of it. She had felt it in Lagos when a classmate told her she'd never pass the bar. She had felt it in London during her LM when a professor suggested she reconsider her ambitions. She recognized it the way you recognize a pothole on a road you've driven 100 times, with weariness, not surprise. Then she opened her laptop and went back to work. Min-jae heard about the bulletin board 3 days later. He didn't hear it from Amara. He heard it from the building's security desk manager, an older man named Mr. O who had worked the night shift for 11 years and missed absolutely nothing. Min-jae called no meeting, made no announcement. By the following Monday, there was a firm-wide communication about professional conduct standards, the dignity of all employees regardless of background or appearance, and the consequences of creating a hostile work environment. It was precise, unambiguous, and delivered in a tone that made it very clear this was not a discussion. Amara read it at her desk and sat quietly for a moment, trying to work out whether she was grateful or bothered that she hadn't handled it herself. She decided with some difficulty that it could be both. The leak began in February. Confidential case strategy. Client communications. Internal billing structures. Someone was passing information to a competing firm called Sungil Partners, and Sungil Partners was using it with embarrassing precision, showing up to negotiations preloaded with arguments that should have been impossible for them to anticipate. Min-jae brought in an external IT forensics team. He tightened document access controls. He interviewed every senior associate personally. And then, on a Wednesday afternoon, a metadata trail in a leaked document pointed to a computer terminal on the third floor. Amara's floor. The whispers started within 48 hours. She felt it before she understood it, the slight shift in how people moved around her. Conversations stopping when she entered rooms. Eyes that followed her with something complicated in them. And then at the coffee machine she overheard it directly. Two junior associates' voices low, not quite low enough. It makes sense when you think about it. She doesn't actually have ties here. Min-jae brought her in out of nowhere. Nobody even vetted her properly. And now suddenly she has access to everything. Amara picked up her coffee cup, turned around and looked directly at both of them. They went silent. "Good morning," she said clearly, and walked away. But her hand was not entirely steady on the cup. Min-jae called her into his office that evening. She sat across from his desk with her back straight and her expression composed and her heart beating considerably faster than she would have liked. "I need to ask you directly," he said. "About the access logs." "I know what the logs show," she said. "I also know I didn't do it. Walk me through your movements on the evenings in question." She did. Methodically, without defensiveness. Dates, times, what she had been working on, who had seen her, what files she had touched and why. She laid it out the way she laid out a legal argument because that was what this was. She was making a case for herself to the one person in this building whose opinion she realized with some discomfort she actually cared about. When she finished, Min-jae was quiet. "I believe you," he said. She felt something release in her chest that she had not known she'd been holding. "But the investigation has to continue," he said. "And I need you to understand that I can't protect you from the process. Only from the conclusion." "I don't need protection," she said. "I need the truth to come out. They're different things." He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "They are." They worked together every evening for the next 2 weeks. And it was complicated. Complicated because Min-jae would hand her a document and their fingers would almost touch and neither of them would say anything. Complicated because he had a habit of watching her when she argued a point, with an expression that wasn't evaluation anymore, and they both knew it. Complicated because she had made herself a rule about this man and the rule was making increasingly poor arguments for itself. "You're staring," she told him one evening without looking up from her laptop. "I'm reviewing the evidence," he said. "The evidence is on the table." "I'm not on the table." "Noted," he said, and she could hear the smile in it, and she told herself firmly that this was a professional situation and she was a professional person and that was the end of that. "Adeyemi," he said a minute later. "Min-jae." Pause. It was the first time she'd used his name directly. "Nothing," he said. "Never mind." She finally looked up. He was looking at her with something so unguarded in his face that she had to look away first, which she had never done in her life, and that was how she knew she was in significant trouble. The break came from the most unexpected source. Mr. O, the night security manager, had been quietly logging something for 3 weeks. Not because he was asked to, but because in 11 years of watching the 14th floor, he had learned that the details nobody asked for were often the most useful. He brought Min-jae a logbook. A handwritten logbook, meticulous and damning, documenting the precise times that Senior Associate Park Ji-soo had been accessing the document archive after business hours. Not Amara's terminal. Ji-soo's personal access card, swiped at the archive entrance, cross-referenced with the metadata of every leaked document, time-stamped within minutes of each access event. Min-jae read through it at his desk at 7 in the morning, and by 8 o'clock, the IT forensics team had confirmed what Mr. O's careful handwriting had already told him. Park Ji-soo had been working for Sungil Partners for 18 months. The terminal metadata had been manipulated to implicate Amara. The whole architecture of it was sophisticated, calculated, and personal. It had been personal from the beginning. If this twist caught you off guard, subscribe to Soul Stories by Timmy, because things are only getting more intense from here. Ji-soo was called in at 9 a.m. Min-jae did not raise his voice. He placed the evidence on the table and he let it speak for itself, which was, in Amara's professional opinion, the most devastating thing he could have done. Because when evidence is airtight, silence is louder than any accusation. Jisoo looked at the logbook, then at the screen, then at Amara, who was sitting beside Min-jae at the table because Min-jae had asked her to be there, and she had said yes without hesitating. She was always going to take opportunities that should have gone to people who actually built this firm, Jisoo said, voice unsteady now. Do you know how long I have worked here? Do you know what I gave up to make partner track? And she walks in with her. Stop. Min-jae's voice was quiet and absolute. You had every right to resent how promotions were handled. You had no right to do this. He paused. You're dismissed. HR will contact you about the terms. Security will escort you out. Jisoo stood. At the door she looked at Amara one last time. Amara said nothing. Not because she had nothing to say. Because she had decided, somewhere in the last 2 weeks of evidence and exhaustion and late evenings with Min-jae's quiet belief sitting beside her like something solid, that the most powerful thing she could do was refuse to become bitter. She had worked too hard to be defined by what was done to her. She left that in the room and walked out. The announcement went firm-wide by noon. By 2 p.m., 3 people who had made comments about Amara's appearance sent her emails of apology that ranged from genuinely remorseful to painfully awkward. She replied to each one with the same grace she would have wanted extended to herself and moved on. The paralegals from the coffee machine came to her office together, clearly having coordinated their apology in advance, which she found endearing enough to forgive them immediately. One of them actually teared up. Amara handed him a tissue and told him he owed her nothing except better professional judgment going forward. Byung-hyun stopped by later, said nothing and placed a cup of barley tea on her desk. In his economy of expression it meant everything. Min-jae found her on the rooftop at 6 p.m. She was standing at the railing with her arms crossed, looking out at the city. She had taken off the silk burgundy scarf she'd worn that day and folded it over the railing beside her, and she stood with her head bare, watching Seoul go gold in the evening light with the particular composure of someone who has earned their peace. He stood beside her without speaking for a while. You could have told them I was innocent from the beginning, she said finally. Even before the evidence was confirmed. You could have used your authority to end it. Yes, he said. But you didn't. Because you told me you needed the truth to come out. Not protection. I listened to you. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't expect that, she said. I know. Another silence, this one different, warmer, closer, like the last 2 inches of space between two people who have both been pretending that space was larger than it was. I don't make things easy, she said. I know that too. I push back on everything. I correct people in meetings. I wear a scarf and some days I feel bulletproof in it and some days I walk past a mirror and have to remind myself who I am. I come from Lagos and my mother calls me every Sunday morning Korean time and the first thing she says is, Amara, are you eating? And the second thing is, Amara, are you winning? I am, a lot, she said, and she was laughing slightly now, softly at herself. I am genuinely a lot. Min-jae turned to look at her. I know, he said, and the warmth in it was so complete that she finally fully looked back at him. That's not a problem I'm trying to solve. That's the reason I'm standing here. He did not kiss her that evening. He was, Amara would tell her mother the following Sunday, maddeningly disciplined for a man who was clearly in love with her. What he did was ask her to dinner. Properly, with the slight formality of someone who understood that she deserved to be asked. They went to a small Korean barbecue restaurant in Mapo that he had been going to since university, where the owner knew his order and looked at Amara with the bright, undisguised curiosity of a woman who had been waiting 15 years for this man to bring someone. Amara ate 3 portions of galbi and won a debate about contract law philosophy that Min-jae had started, she suspected, specifically to watch her win it. He walked her to her subway stop afterward. So, she said at the entrance. So, he agreed. You're going to do this properly, she said. It wasn't a question. Every step, he said. She looked at him. This disciplined, warm, quietly extraordinary man who had believed her when it mattered and listened to her when it counted and looked at her like she was exactly enough, with or without the scarf, on the bulletproof days and the mirror days both. Good, she said. And went home. And texted her best friend from Lagos immediately, who responded with approximately 40 emoji and a voice note of screaming. The months that followed were the best of Amara's professional life and she would admit privately, the the best of her personal one. She was promoted to senior associate by March. By June she had led her first major case independently and won it on a precedent argument she had spent 3 months building from scratch. The legal press covered it. Min-jae read the article at his desk and folded it and put it in his drawer, which she discovered 6 months later and which she brought up every time she wanted to embarrass him, which was frequently and with great joy. They argued about cases. They argued about strategy. She corrected him in meetings and he thanked her for it afterward, which she had not anticipated and which disarmed her completely every single time. He learned to make her barley tea correctly, which required very specific water temperature and a particular waiting time, and she learned that his habit of going quiet wasn't coldness but thought, and that if she waited long enough, what came out of that quiet was always worth hearing. His mother called him every Sunday. Amara's mother called her every Sunday. The Sunday they decided to have one combined call was, by general consensus, the loudest 2 hours either of their phones had ever experienced. Min-jae's mother asked Amara 17 questions about Nigerian food. Amara's mother asked Min-jae 4 questions about his income, 3 questions about his intentions, and 1 question about whether he knew how to cook, to which he said yes, to which Amara's mother said, "Good. A man who can cook has good character. I've always believed this." Min-jae caught Amara's eye across the room. She mouthed, "She is exactly like you described." He mouthed back, "And you love it." She made a face. He was completely right. He proposed on a Tuesday. Not a grand gesture. No restaurant, no crowd, no performance. They were in the office late working on a brief, the city lights doing their usual thing below them, and he put down his pen and said her name and she looked up and he said, "I've thought about how to do this 100 times. I keep coming back to this. Just you and me and the work we're both in love with and the fact that I have been in love with you for considerably longer than I've admitted to anyone, including myself." He opened the box. She looked at the ring for a moment. "Min-jae," she said. "Amara. You proposed in the office. You live in the office. That is," she was laughing now helplessly, which was not how she had imagined this moment but was, she realized, exactly right, exactly them, exactly this. "That is such a very you thing to do. Is that a yes?" "Obviously it's a yes," she said. "Yes. Obviously." They were married the following spring. 2 ceremonies. One in Seoul, one in Lagos, because why choose when you can have both, which is a philosophy Amara had applied to most things in her life with generally excellent results. The Seoul ceremony was elegant and the Lagos ceremony was, in the best possible way, an event. Min-jae danced at the Lagos reception with the focused determination of a man who had prepared for this specifically and was not going to be defeated by it. And Amara's father laughed so hard he had to sit down, and Min-jae's mother was caught on video attempting the zanku, which became the family's most treasured document. 3 years after the wedding, Amara became the youngest partner in KM Legal's history. The announcement was made at a firm meeting. When Min-jae read her name aloud, she was sitting in the back of the room because she had not known it was coming, and the sound of it, her full name read in his voice, in this room where she had once watched a wig catalog be taken down from a bulletin board, hit her somewhere behind her sternum with an impact she wasn't entirely prepared for. She didn't cry. She sat very still and let it settle, the way you let something good settle when you've wanted it for a long time and worked even longer and finally it's yours. Then she exhaled. And accepted the applause with the particular grace of someone who knows exactly what it costs to earn it. People sometimes asked her, in interviews and at firm events and on the occasions when junior associates came to her with wide eyes and bigger ambitions, what the secret was. What had gotten her here. What she would tell herself if she could go back. She always paused before she answered because she took the question seriously. "There isn't a secret," she would say. "There's just the work. And the decision every single day to believe in yourself loudly enough that when the room goes quiet, you can still hear it." She would straighten whatever she was wearing, scarf, wig, or sometimes nothing at all, depending on the day and her mood and how bulletproof she was feeling. And she would look at whoever was asking with the full force of everything she had survived and built and chosen. Don't make yourself smaller so other people are more comfortable. Don't wait for permission to be exceptional. And forgive the people who doubted you. Not because they deserve it but because you do. On the night of their 5th anniversary, Amara and Min-jae walked along the Han River after dinner, the city doing its glittering thing around them, and she thought about a younger version of herself in an office at the end of the hallway next to a jammed printer, reading a footnote on page 31 that nobody else had bothered with. She thought about what it had cost and what it had built and what it had led to, and she looked at this man walking beside her, her partner in the office and in everything outside it, and felt the particular fullness of a life that had gone exactly as hard as it needed to, and not one moment harder than that. "What?" he said, catching her expression. "Nothing," she said. "I'm just thinking. About." She took his hand. "About how the case would have gone very differently if I hadn't read Exhibit 23C. He laughed, a real one, the full version she'd gotten very good at producing. "Our entire life hinged on a logistics footnote," he said. "Most great things do," she said. And they walked on into the lit-up city, into everything that came next. Soul Stories by Timmy, where every love story is worth telling. Subscribe for more Afro-Korean stories that travel around the world.